Reverse engineer your competitors' top content. In the previous video, I mentioned that you're going to have to mix in your original content. Now, the question that's probably on the top of your minds is, how do I know which content to produce? Well, there are two ways to do this, like I mentioned earlier in this training. You can try to figure out things on your own and engage in all sorts of experiments, or you can just simply allow your competitors to do your homework for you. I hope you can see which path is the easiest. It should be obvious. If you are sending the very best content on your niche, your original content must be at the same level or better. Otherwise, your followers are not going to take the bait. They're not going to trust your brand. They appreciate the fact that you're collecting all this information, and they're probably going to stick around and follow your social media accounts. However, you can't count on them to do much of anything else. There's really no incentive for them to join your mailing list. Why should they? Your content is not that great. They only need to compare the kind of original content you produce with the other top-notch third-party stuff you're sharing to see your weakness. Do you see the problem here? You have to produce top content if you want your brand to be credible. Thankfully, this is easier than you think. Simply reverse engineer your competitors. Look at their most successful stuff. How do you know? Look at the social media indicators of their content. How many likes does their top content get? How many shares? Is there any other indicator that shows that this content actually has traction? Maybe you should pay attention to the number of comments for that content. Maybe you would want to run a backlink checker on a piece of content and see how many other blogs or websites link to that piece of content. This is how you measure the overall success of any single piece of content so you can use it as a template, if you will, for your own content. I'm not saying that you should rip it off. Instead, I'm encouraging you to use it as a starting point and come up with something so much better. Focus on what works. When you look at your competitors' most social pieces of content, you are basing your own original content on themes and topics that actually work. They have traction with your target audience members. You're not wasting money or time taking wild guesses. This is one of the most common mistakes social media marketers make. They think that they have the best ideas regarding hot content in their niche, so they come up with all sorts of content that they think is just plain awesome, only to fall flat on their faces. I'm telling you, for every 100 pieces of those types of original content, maybe 10 would gain any sort of respectable traction in your niche. It's too expensive, and it burns too much time. Thankfully, there is a better way. You just need to reverse engineer your competitors' most successful content. Use that as a starting point. You can adjust them. You can modify them. You can come up with your own variations. But at least you get a head start. At least you're in the ballpark when you start off. You're not just taking random shots in the dark. Learn from your own success. After you have started curating and mixing in your original content, pay attention to your statistics. They should tell you which of your content gets the most love. If you notice that a handful of your curated third-party content gets a lot of retweets, shares on Facebook, or any other indication of social media engagement, pay close attention to those pieces of content. At some level or another, they struck a nerve. They caught your audience members' attention in a very positive way. Find these successful curated pieces of content and create original versions of them. Similarly, if you have many different original pieces of content, only a handful of them will be really successful. Pay attention to those. Find them. Once you've identified them, create more of them. Focus on the same themes and present similar information the same way. The key here is to focus on what works and expand it and grow it. Ditch the stuff that failed. Build on your strengths. Create derivative, cross-platform variations of your most successful content. Now that you have a clear idea of how to create content that has proven traction, don't just keep reverse engineering it. While you need to continue doing that, you also have to do something else. Create derivative or cross-platform versions. For example, one particular type of blog post does well on all your social media accounts. Identify its themes, pay attention to its patterns, and come up with another blog post. See if that works. If you achieve the same level of success, you're onto something. This is not a fluke. This is not a one-time thing. You have struck on a theme that your audience members readily enjoy. The next step is to take things to a whole other level. Instead of just cranking out yet another blog post, create videos about that theme. Make specialized diagrams. Produce infographics. Take these materials and share them on social media platforms that specialize in those formats. For example, for blog post URLs, share them on Twitter and Facebook. For videos, share them on YouTube. For diagrams and infographics, share them on Pinterest. Drilling even deeper, Look at your hottest blog posts and strip out key questions and use these as leads or titles for tweets. Tweet the same content several times over the course of a week. Of course, don't drop it all in 1 hour, but space them out. Still, when you use the right questions, you become very visible on Twitter. Pair these with the right hashtags. The bottom line, the great thing about content curation is you save a lot of money, but you are also positioning yourself to build on your strengths. You focus on things that you're doing right and figuring them out so that you can predictably produce successful content. Now, this is not going to happen overnight. You have to keep experimenting until you find the right themes that consistently work with your audience. Fine-tune your payload content. As I have mentioned previously, you can come up with your very own content based primarily on the social signals of the top-notch third-party materials you are curating. Put simply, when you are going through your research, you will keep coming across certain pieces of content which get a lot of engagement on social media. These are all the objective indicators you need to understand that you are looking at high-quality, high-demand content. At that point, you can come up with your own version of that content. You can use it as a template, so to speak. Another approach would be to just do curation first. You just take all the high-quality third-party content with great social signals and put them all on auto-publish on your social media accounts. You run this curation campaign for several weeks. Soon enough, you will see a pattern. Eventually, you will see that some of these materials get a lot more engagement than others. At that point, you can then come up with your own version. Personally, I pick my own content using both methods. If I'm in a hurry to get people to sign up to my mailing list, I do the first method. But if I'm unsure about the niche or I'm still trying to feel my way around in terms of understanding my audience, I would stick to the second method. There's really no one right answer. It really all depends on your situation. The great thing about the second method is that you are picking out your original content strategy based on what actually works in terms of your social media accounts. You have to understand that even though high-quality third-party content may have a lot of objective social signals, those signals may have been generated in different contexts. Maybe the original publisher was doing something that you may not be doing. Do you see how this works? Still, you can definitely do the first method if you're in a hurry. But if you have some time to spare, you might want to try the second method. Do curation first, let it run, and then pay attention to your statistics. You should be able to see a pattern. In fact, based on my experience, content that tends to do well often falls within a narrow range of themes. In fact, in some of my campaigns, almost all of the content that got a lot of love from the internet was focused on one question. That's how focused your audience's needs may be. You should pay a lot of attention to the following. Look at the engagement of the content and the click-through. A lot of social media marketers drop the ball at this point. They think that it's all about engagement. Now, I'm telling you, regardless of how many likes, shares, or comments a piece of content gets, if people don't click through, those engagement signals are not worth much. Remember, at the end of the day, you want traffic. That's the whole reason why you're doing this in the first place. Getting caught up in how many shares, likes, or comments you get is not going to do you any good. You have to always pay attention to the click-through. There has to be some sort of ratio between total engagement and click-through. The higher the ratio of the click-through, the more attention you should devote to a piece of content. Study high click-through and high engagement content closely. Now that you have identified curated content that performs well, the next step is to analyze them with a fine-tooth comb. Ask yourself, what problems are people interested in when they read this piece of content? How are these pieces of content positioned or presented? Do they use some sort of emotional headline? Do they use subheadings that ask questions? Do they drag the person along, or do they just lay out the information dead center? Pay attention to cosmetic issues. People do judge a book by its cover, and blog posts and articles are no different. How are these materials formatted? Do they have big pictures? Do they have header pictures? Do they use diagrams? What are they doing exactly? Once you've answered all these questions and you're comfortable with the answers you got, the next step is to create your own content specification sheet. This is going to be your template. Now, make sure that you're not just basing it on one successful piece of content. That third-party content might be a fluke. The company behind it might just have gotten lucky, and for some reason, that piece of content went viral. That's not going to help you. You have to base your template on the success of many different pieces of curated content. This way, you can be more confident of the fact that even if you barely comply with all the specifications, you would at least get some decent and positive results. Using the information above, create payload content. Now that you have gotten your template together, you need to create your own high-quality, high-engagement original content. This content is going to be used to sell people on your mailing list. When they read this content, they're supposed to get excited about joining your mailing list. This is content that is most likely to be credible and most likely to be shared. Are you excited? Well, don't get too excited. A lot of people jump in with both feet and they end up sabotaging themselves because the payload content they create looks like an advertisement. That's obvious spam. Nobody's going to trust you with that. You're obviously trying to pull tricks and play games. That's not going to work. Instead, the content must be informative. Think of it as an infomercial. You're selling something, that much is obvious. But people have to walk away with solid value. You have to walk that tightrope. There's a thin line between shoving stuff down people's throats and providing solid value without asking for anything in return. You have to come up with a decent compromise between the two. The bottom line is, whatever you do, the content you produce must be valuable. It must add value to the lives of people reading your materials. That's how you build credibility. That's how you get people to get excited about your mailing list. Remember, your list is supposed to add value to their lives. It's going to be very hard to give that impression when the content that you share is worthless. I hope you can see that. I'll see you in the next video.